Briahna Joy Gray is the host of the Bad Faith podcast. She's co-host on The Rising. She's also a host on Debrief on Call-In, former National Press Secretary for Bernie Sanders in 2020. And we're gonna try to clear the air today in terms of what folks believe, what I believe, what she believes, what everybody believes. So this ought to be interesting. Briahna, welcome.
Thanks, Cenk. I appreciate you having me.
No problem. So let's keep it real right out of the gate. Some have called you the fake left, including me. Now, I'll tell you why I called you that, and then you tell me why I'm wrong, okay? So it seemed that you had an alliance, which I don't know if you still have or not, and were like-minded with other fake leftists, like Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Tulsi Gabbard. First, Tulsi Gabbard hosting Tucker Carlson's show on Friday. Do you still think that they have good intent and that they are not fake left, that they just happen to just pummel the left and agree with the right wing all the time, just coincidentally? I'm just curious what your take on that is, lately.
I didn't catch it. I've never actually met or spoken to or corresponded with Tulsi Gabbard. I don't really have a relationship with her. Like a lot of people on the left, I really appreciated her standing up for Bernie in 2016. But honestly, haven't really followed her much since. So, I think part of my frustration is the characterization of me having an alliance with people that I barely think about, much less, have a relationship with. I do have a relationship with Glenn. He was my boss at The Intercept. He's been supportive of me throughout my career. I think he's obviously very bright and thoughtful. And when we agree. And I find that he's one of the best advocates for whatever it is that we agree on. When we disagree, I have him on my show and we talk about it. And I have brought up some of the criticisms to him directly that people have about whether or not he pushes back sufficiently hard. But he goes on Tucker Carlson and other similar shows. We probably will continue to disagree about how one should best handle those types of situations. But I think there's a lot of room on the left for a lot of different people advocating for a lot of overlapping interests. And I'm happy to be a part of that.
Okay, so that's an interesting answer and a good answer. And guys, let me clarify from the beginning as well that I wouldn't have Jimmy Dore on this show. I think he's a total fraud and gets all of his money from the right wing and is one of the worst people in media. But Briahna is on the show because we're gonna actually have a real conversation where we figure out what our opinions are instead of yelling at each other through other people, etc. online. So obviously I think that you might have good faith. And I'm also being honest and saying might. Okay, so let's actually talk. And I've read some of your pieces, Briahna, that I totally agreed with. So let's get into what you think. I might come back to the Jimmys of the world, but I might not. But I hear you, and that's already an important clarification that you don't view it as a quote unquote alliance, whatever that means. Okay.
Yeah, what do you mean by that, Cenk?
I think Jimmy is an obvious right winger now. He does these idiotic, videos about. Hold on. Let me explain. You asked the question and about how the vaccine, he's skeptical of it because he's making money off that. Earlier he was doing pro-vaccine videos.
I wasn't asking about Jimmy. My question was about what you mean. What do you mean about me? Since we're here, I really do think you probably should have Jimmy on the show and talk to him about Jimmy. But what do you mean when you characterize me and Jimmy or me and whomever as having a quote unquote alliance?
Because in the days where he was doing forced to vote and all that nonsense. And then we had a blow up with him over things that happened here. And I saw you and Katie Halper and Glenn Greenwald and all those folks constantly supporting Jimmy. And I thought, well, that's mental. So that's what I meant by it. But you're saying you're not necessarily allied with him.
Well, Cenk,
I was gonna take that at face value.
Well, I firmly believe in force the vote, and I support force the vote, as did Cornell Hedges and Crystal Ball and Kyle Kalinske. And a whole lot of people on the left, a lot of members of DSA and the chapter that I used to belong to, a lot of people across the left spectrum really understood that it's really important to force the vote on various issues, to expose folks who only performatively believe in various things. And I've seen you yourself talk since then about how important it is to get people to go ahead and vote for various issues that they as Democrats often espouse, but at the end of the day, hide behind whether that's parliamentarian or other kind of procedural factors to disguise the extent to which that they actually don't want to follow through on some of these policies because their donor base won't allow them to. So I did and continue to believe that enforce the vote. It was frustrating to me that we weren't able to have a conversation at the time because it seemed like a lot of the pushback against force the vote had to do with a mistaken belief that Kevin McCarthy could be Speaker of the House, which of course was wrong and debunked and was promulgated by a lot of folks, and it could have been easily cleared up without a lot of the animus that ended up coming out of that moment. And I really appreciate that Sam Cedar was willing to come on Bad Faith podcast and have a prolonged, civilized conversation about it that I think ultimately had the potential to move us all forward instead of dividing the left community.
Okay, look, I didn't do a good job of starting this conversation off on the right foot, which I wanted to, but now that we're off on the wrong foot, something you just said really got under my skin, and it's something that you've mischaracterized before. You said since then about force the vote, as if I've changed my mind. I've been challenging the Democratic establishment for 20 straight years here. So the idea that like these Johnny-come-latelys come in and go, oh my God, we had this amazing idea. What if we challenge the Democrats to have a vote? That's the oldest thing in the book, and then you guys like pretend like you came up with it. And then there's all this talk about like change politics at TYT that's mental, not supported by one shred of evidence. And you did that on your show with Jordan Sheridan. What do you mean change politics? Change politics how? What are you talking about?
And with all due respect, I'm really confused. I certainly didn't mean to take any credit away from the work that you've been doing in the left community for a very long time. So many people who listen to my show talk about how they were onboarded to the left because of watching shows like TYT, which at the time were, really unique in the breadtube space, really defined what it means to be a leftist on YouTube. So I don't think this should be a conversation about who gets credit for what. For me personally, I didn't care who came up with Force the Vote. I actually heard of the idea first from watching Sam Cedar's show. And he mentioned that there was an idea that he thought was a good idea that came from Jimmy Dore. And that's what perked my ears up because I knew that there was some friction there between those two. And I thought, wow, if Sam is willing to say this about an idea that he heard about from Jimmy Dore, which of course Jimmy Dore didn't invent either. And he says this very openly, that he got it from the DSA, that it was a tactic that was listed in the 2019 DSA kind of strategic document. And of course, like in the context of Force the Vote, we always talked about how this was a model that was used by suffragettes rather, in the early part of the last century, that having people vote on bills, even as they were voted down, really ginned up a lot of public interest in women's equality and those kinds of things. So yeah, I certainly don't think we as a left community should be talking about credit or who's first or anything like that. I think the goal should be for us to come together and try to figure out the best way strategically to go forward.
Sorry to bring Cenk back to the stage here if you've been watching the entire time. But now let's go to the more recent exchange between Briahna and Cenk. It feels to me like there was a lot of residual anger or emotion from the previous conversation the two had when Bree came on to TYT after Cenk had called her a fake leftist. And then she was like, why would you call me that? And she got her feelings hurt a little bit. And he said, hey, come on the show. And they kind of had a conversation and was very contentious. I remember putting the actual video on Twitter and calling Cenk big baby bitch or something like that. And it went viral. It was like 1,400 likes on the video. I tagged him. It was so many comments on there. But what is your sort of preface to this video before we get started? We'll start with Keaton and then go to Kit.
Well, Cenk makes Kyle look like he's red-pilled. I mean, Cenk says, I promise you, we're going to win these primaries. We're going to start winning these primaries. Your candidate, because Cenk is a Marianne guy to the extent that he's invested.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he's not an RFK guy. He said in this piece here, he said Marianne's by far the best of the three in the running now for the Democratic nomination. Your candidate's losing like 71-5 against the closest thing to an actual corpse that will ever run for president. And you're here promising, oh, don't worry, we're getting close. We're going to start winning these primaries. Nonsense. I mean, there's absolutely zero evidence for that. And so the level of gaslighting on his part in terms of what his actual strategy is worse than Kyle. At least Kyle's starting to bend the knee and get real with his audience that they're going to have to vote for Joe Biden. Cenk is still out here saying, no, we're getting closer. We're marching the ball down the field and we're going to start winning. Don't you worry. It's absolutely ludicrous. It's absolutely. I mean, he doesn't say Marianne's going to win this time, but he says in the interview, says, we're going to start winning these primaries. I promise. What evidence is there to show any of that? You're losing ground rapidly, not gaining ground. And it's because of the composition of the Democratic Party, not just on the leadership side, but on the voter side. The Democratic electorate does not want revolutionary figures inside it. It's a counter-revolutionary party. That's what Jill Stein has said, and she's absolutely right about that. If that helps get you back on her good side, CJ, I'm happy to put in a good word for her now in this segment.
I think she's pretty fair-handed. I think she knows a critique and be fair.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think she'd be like that.
Absolutely. I'm just messing around. But that point remains, and Cenk, has this book out that he apparently started advertising like 2 years ago. It's finally out. And just like Ryan Grimm has a book coming out on the Squad in time for Christmas, I mean, these books are 4 years too late. It's just absurd that you have these guys running around trying to sell this narrative at this point, but here they are, and I guess we'll take a look in a few minutes.
Look, what I saw here is a man who's trying to fight to keep himself relevant in a political environment that has moved on without him. He had the audacity to say that there was no election fraud that took place during the 2016 primary. He had the audacity to keep on saying that Jimmy Dore is being unhinged or crazy or foaming at the mouth, even though I remember forced to vote. He has the audacity to still promote Justice Democrats, even though they're the ones that kicked him out of the organization that he created, which I found to be wrong for them to do in the first place. He has, again, this inability to see the bigger picture that no one is believing in this idea of a progressive running a Democratic primary. I mean, look, again, Keaton, to do Dissidence credit, you guys brought up the fact that Marianne Williamson's campaign is nothing more than a glorified book tour. The evidence is out there. I saw the video that you guys did. It's all out there. We cannot ignore it. Plus, her history of abusing her staff. It's out there. Everybody in the audience can do their own research. That's right. Controversial statement. Do your own research and you'll see it. The evidence is there. And this book, Justice is Coming. No, it's not. When there was, again, election fraud, which he denied, not only in this interview, but on the PBD podcast, where he said that there was no election fraud took place. Guys, did you know on TYT's network that they actually did a documentary about what happened in California and how votes were stolen from Bernie Sanders during the 2016 primary in California? TYT, on one of their secondary channels, did a documentary. It's still up there. I did a video on it. I showed snippets of this documentary. It's there. This man is another reality. And not only is Trump living rent-free in his head, but so is Jimmy Dore. He's in his own reality. And then here's something that I have to call out. Number one, we do remember when TYT did that $2 million fundraiser for their 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, or their investigative journalists. There was Sean King, Michael Tracy, Nomiki Kant, and Jordan Sheridan, right? That never came into fruition. But then he says with Briahna Joy Gray there that they repaid the $24 million they got from Katzenberg. Katzenberg still sits on the board of TYT. I don't think they paid that off. $24 million. They got that in 2016. And they got rid of all their secondary channels, and they had to lay off some people too. And again, there are some serious red flags here. Now, again, maybe Cenk did pay it off, but that's $24 freaking million that you get from a Clinton donor. I call out the veracity in paying it out. Now, again, if he did, I'll apologize, but it doesn't add up to me. Maybe it's my inner Chicagoan who grew up on the south side of Chicago, seeing guys getting smacked around when they owe money to dudes who will break legs if they have to get their money. But maybe I'm wrong. Keaton, CJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know. It's just throughout this entire interview, I'm seeing a man melting down who is jealous of Jimmy Dore and upset that people have moved on without him. but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah,
maybe
he
I'm
doesn't
wrong.
understand that his politics shifting meant that there's a certain segment of people that was going to leave him, and what he really doesn't like is how like you either love Jimmy or hate Jimmy, but the people who love Jimmy. You get what I'm saying? There's no one that go, I love Cenk. You get what I'm saying? There's no one that does that. So there's a certain level, in my opinion, of jealousy that is a tinge of jealousy you can hear in what he's saying. Oh, my daughter came in the room to get her cell phone and some games, of course. All right, so let's start the video. We'll try our best to let us play as long as we can before we just have to outburst and
it's just
speak
okay.
on it. Yeah. So let's listen.
Part of something larger, and then a movement is
actually. Let me rewind it to the actual music. I kind of like the little intro music. Let's listen.
Founder of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, is out with a new book entitled Justice is Coming, How Progressives Are Going to Take Over the Country, and America is going to love it. I don't know if I'm going to love it.
I can't. So let me tell you, I forgot to tell both of you. I decided to come on this blind. So I haven't watched this is as much as I've watched. I haven't watched any of this yet at all. And I did that
brace yourself,
man.
Well, I think you can probably, if you haven't seen it before, Kit, you let me know if you second this. I think the good stuff between him and Bree starts at like the 20-minute mark, right?
Actually, like around 18:21.
Because the first part of it is just kind of boring with Robbie.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll definitely
18:21 is when he has his epic meltdown. Now at 4 minutes and 48 seconds, he does talk. Yeah, I know. So because I rewind shit all the time.
Wait, but kid, hold it, because I want to go through each of your timestamps one at a time. We're gonna start with the first one. You said 4
minutes and 48 seconds into it, I believe, is where he is confronted about I believe progressives moving on, but again, to Keaton's point, 18 minutes and 21 seconds in is where you get the
where it really gets the grit.
Yeah,
okay,
the epic meltdown. Go ahead.
Why I stopped it here is because I saw your coverage on Do Dissidence about Ryan's book. Do we see a parallel here? Do we see both of them coming out with books? Is this like book season, Keaton, that I don't know about? Where you know what I mean? Like, is it seasons of books where they all come out at the same thing? And are the topics similar? He's kind of writing historically about the same movement, and he's writing forward thinking about the same movement, kind of. Go ahead. Keaton,
yeah, no, I mean, they are very similar books, and it is kind of strange that they're coming out right around the same time because they're kind of competing with each other. The difference is, that Ryan Grimm just announced the release of his book a couple weeks ago, which is kind of sleazy in the sense that he didn't disclose that he was writing a book on the Squad back when he was defending them for the rail strike and all that stuff. He could have disclosed that, hey, full disclosure, I'm working on a book on the Squad, because that's been the charge against Ryan Grimm for a while now, is that he is an access journalist, and the fact that he was working on this book kind of in secret for a while definitely corroborates those claims. Cenk, on the other hand, has been peddling this book for years. He's been selling this book for a long time. He said that this book was coming out like 2 years ago.
No,
I don't know
if
you guys remember that, but he's been talking up this book like forever. Maybe 3 years. Yeah, he's been talking this up forever.
I'm so out of the loop.
Similar books, but two very different promotional styles. Ryan Grimm springs it on us at the last minute. This guy has been hawking. He's been hawking this book,
but it's so them. The styles are so them. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
exactly,
Ryan Grimm style. Like it looks like he just comes to interview with his hair.
Right.
You know what I mean? He just shows up, and Cenk is obviously procrastinating, dodging, and you know what I mean. And then he eventually does it. It's so them. It shows their personality, at least on screen personality. I don't know them in person.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to announce that I'm going to be writing my own book called I Am Always Right, a Kit Cabell story of bravery.
coming out February 2033. Yeah, pre-orders are pre-order now. We'll ship it to you in 9 years.
All right, so I fast forward to the point you marked, and then I rewinded 1 minute. So 1 minute before your mark, I think you said 1821 or something.
Yeah,
so
this is the golden part, and you want to continue forward because we're gonna witness a grown-ass man meltdown. Number two, let me just tell everyone, show running 101, because my mother worked in makeup art, designing, and production sets. You never wear a goddamn striped shirt to a freaking television interview.
No,
he doesn't care. He doesn't live by those rules.
you gotta live by those rules.
That's why Trump won in 2016 in the first place. The country is so deeply anti-establishment, except no one on TV will ever tell you that, because they are the establishment. They're not going to come on TV and go, hey, by the way, country, I'm going to end the gaslighting here. It turns out you guys all hate us. They're not going to say that, okay? So that is the absolute reality here. So, but when you get into the Jimmys of the world, there's audience capture and there's financial interest. And then some have just lost their minds, in my opinion. Okay. And so, for example, Jimmy does a video that's pro-vaccine. It doesn't get a lot of views. He does one that's vaccine skeptical. It gets a lot of views. Guess what he does next? 20 more videos that are vaccine skeptical. That's called audience capture. And you partly do it for the ego and you partly do it for the money. And it takes strength not to go in that direction. And the right wing is going and capturing these hosts one by one. And everybody has their different things. Look, I don't know Russell Brand and Glenn Greenwald's situation, but I do know that sometimes if some people have done terrible things, where are you going to go? You're not going to go to the left, where they're going to out you and they're not going to support you. You're going to go to the right, where they circle the wagons and they say you can do anything you want as long as you agree with us.
Cenk, I have to offer some, I think, pushback there. One on two fronts. One, I do think that you're accurately describing a psychological phenomenon where if people are getting a lot of criticism and pushback, some of which they perceive to be bad faith, there is an inclination to spend more time with people who have been nicer. I'm not saying that's a moral choice, but it is an obvious psychological outcome. And does that mean that people within the left community should perhaps extend more grace to each other so that that doesn't actually happen? And the second, I would just want to ask you about, similar accusations, I feel I would be remiss not to bring up, that have been made about your network, Young Turks, about the $20 million of Katzenberg money that some people have argued changed.
He's seething. That's it. Okay, so since I have the ability to come in this fresh, I can have a natural reaction. That's the question that lights the fire, because he's not there yet. And you said this is where it started.
Yeah,
this is it. That question, she says $20 million. He said, "Oh, this mother right here." Okay, you want to take it there, Bree? Okay, now gloves are off. So that seems like that's what's about to happen. Did you want to chime in, Kit, before I play?
No. Just look at his face, because you could tell here's where he just like loses it. He has a candle that's been lit too long kind of meltdown, and that's what's going to happen. So, you're fast forwarding it. I think you went a little bit past it.
No, because I did go fast forward a little bit, because I wanted to show the audience to look how this is the place where his face immediately changes right there. You see right that grin goes? See that grin? But let's pick it up and let's play it right here.
Of Katzenberg money that some people have argued changed the direction of TYT's coverage in a more liberal and less left direction.
Yeah.
Is that not the critique, and is that not true? I think that critique is accurate, and I believe that critique is true. Now, he's heard it. I'm not sure he's actually, at least I haven't seen it, maybe one of you. I have never seen him ask this in an interview that he has to answer. Have either of you seen him answer this question about the $20 million from Katzenberg?
No. This is the first time because I even was asking my colleague Daniel, because Daniel even did like a breakdown about the 20 or 24 million that he got from Katzenberg. And what Daniel has informed me, because he was working on the math when we were looking at it together, because Daniel's really good with numbers. He was saying, like, not only are they not only is TYT responsible in paying this off, but they have to pay it off in a fast pace, because these people want an investment return right away, because it's always about short-term profits. So I call in the veracity of Cenk saying on air that they did pay it off. Again, look, I will admit that I might be wrong. Maybe Cenk did. But $24 million, 2016, and since then, TYT has been on decline. Maybe their highest peak was at 2018. But if you look at their viewership, again, people tuning in or following them, it is nowhere on par to where they were at in 2016 when they were all with Bernie Sanders. There's a difference between TYT when they got struck by lightning by Bernie and then the aftermath. It's been a slow burn decline. Again, I will say I could be wrong about all of this, but Daniel went over the numbers, and I've been looking at their numbers, and I think we've all been kind of disconnected with TYT. Unless, Keaton, you got something you want to bring in. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I haven't seen him confronted on this, but it's just amazing that he would be so indignant about this topic, given the fact that TYT built their brand as being independent and free of corporate influence, right? I mean, their whole thesis is that mainstream media is corrupt because it's funded by wealthy donors. And then they take a check from Jeffrey Katzenberg for $20 million, and they get indignant when people call them out for that. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. That's like you show up to an organic farmer's market with a Monsanto logo on your truck, and people look at you weird. You're like, oh, what, okay, what? I can't, what, I'm not welcome here? I can't set up here? Like, what's the problem? Like, of course there's a problem. It's fundamental. Your whole reason to be is that you are supposedly the antidote to corporate-funded media. So, of course, when you turn around and take a check for $20 million, people are going to be suspicious of that. Why wouldn't they be? You've trained them to be.
True that. All right, let's get back to the video. I mean, this is it though. I mean, I haven't seen the video, and I can identify this is the moment.
Obvious psychological outcome. And does that mean that people within the left community should perhaps extend more grace?
Oh yeah, this is it right
to each other, so that doesn't actually happen. And the second, I would just want to ask you about, similar accusations, I feel I would be remiss not to bring up, that have been made about your network, Young Turks, about the $20 million of Katzenberg money that some people have argued changed the direction of TYT's coverage in a more liberal and less left direction.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll take it one at a time. Should people show each other more grace on the left? Absolutely. At the same time, you notice a phenomenon, it's okay to point it out. So it's okay for us to point out what Jimmy does with his videos is super obvious. It's one thing to criticize the Democratic Party. As you can tell from this interview, I do it very regularly and very forcefully. It's another thing to say the Republicans are okay. The Republicans are not okay. The Republicans are a disaster. The Republicans are much worse than the Democrats. Okay, now on to the second issue. Yeah, so then people go and look around and they go, okay, well, the Young Turks got $20 million investment. Okay, now here's the things people don't know. People say Katzenberg was involved, no question. The amount he has is near microscopic. And so, by the way, we paid the money back. So I be honest, that's breaking news.
I call that out. Again, $24 million. You're saying it's microscopic. He still has a board at your, again, he still has a seat at your board. And if not, he's going to have his ancillaries. Look, when I interviewed Jimmy Dore way back in 2020, okay, and we've all talked to Jimmy, we've seen Jimmy Dore even reflect on this, right? And that is, when they got that money, he has said on numerous occasions that there was a shift in the tone at TYT, that they were going to move to the center, that they would have to start reorganizing themselves, that they had to start dressing more professionally, that they had to switch up how TYT was. Because I think we remember TYT before 2016 and after 2016, okay? And there was a big shift in tone and coverage, and the Democrats were getting nice little tongue baths. And when Jimmy Dore was still part of TYT, he had Aggressive Progressive, but that was the most popular show because people were still tuning in with Jimmy because, again, Jimmy was saying on that platform, or at least at the time he was with TYT, was Aggressive Progressive, that Hey, there was election fraud. Hey, Hillary Clinton lost the election because she was a terrible candidate. And they put it behind a paywall. How do I know that? Because even I was a guest on that show for Aggressive Progressive, and that was behind a paywall. It was behind a goddamn paywall. So the thing is, Cenk, you did have a change. TYT did change, and getting that Katzenberg cash, even if you did pay it off, its legacy and impact on your network is for everyone to see, because for those diehard viewers, they remember. And that's what caused many people to turn away from TYT because, oh, what? We have to be patient, keep our powder dry to vote Democrat, get the hell out of here. Not to mention, again, he's going to keep on talking about Jimmy. He lives rent-free in his head. This is very sad. You can see
what does paying back have to do with anything? Like that has nothing to do
that's the thing
with
that's
anything.
Really strange.
Yeah. Go ahead, Keaton. Go ahead.
Well, that's what's really strange about what he said here. He said earlier on it was an investment. Okay, so he says it wasn't a loan because when he says we paid it back, that makes it sound like it was a loan.
Yeah, exactly.
But if it was an investment, what that means is I'm assuming that Katzenberg maybe received a quarterly dividend, based on his investment, which means when they say they paid it back, all they meant in that case, if that's the case, is that they were profitable enough to the point where they could pay Katzenberg back the $24 million over the course of whatever the investment, whenever they got the money. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened because I don't know that that's what happened. But unless it was a loan, you would assume it would have to be structured that way, because how else could you say you quote unquote paid it back? If it wasn't a loan, but it was an investment, that means Katzenberg probably had a piece of the action, and he's probably recouped that initial $20 million investment by now. But that's not paying it back. That means you've made enough money to the point where he's recouped on his initial investment. Now, once again, just want to be 100% on the level. I'm not saying that is what happened. I'm saying it sounds like that's what he's saying if he's saying that it was an investment and not a loan. If it's an investment, he must have a stake in the company somehow.
His answer is very jumbled. Let's listen to it again, because
let's listen to that again.
It's very jumbled, and that happens when you're trying to obfuscate the truth. You're trying to give as much of the truth as you can without showing your whole hand. Because you notice mid-thought, he'll start a sentence, and in mid-thought, he completely changes like AOC does. She does this very same thing when she's trying to address an issue she doesn't want to address. Let's listen.
Okay, so I'll take it one at a time. Should people show each other more grace on the left? Absolutely. At the same time, you notice a phenomenon. It's okay to point it out. So it's okay for us to point out what Jimmy does with his videos. It's super obvious. It's one thing to criticize the Democratic Party. As you can tell from this interview, I do it very regularly and very forcefully. It's another thing to say the Republicans are okay. The Republicans are not okay. The Republicans are a disaster. The Republicans are much worse than the Democrats. Okay, now on to the second issue. Yeah, so then people go and look around and they go, okay, well, the Young Turks got $20 million investment. Okay, now here's the things people don't know. People say Katzenberg was involved, no question. The amount he has is near microscopic. And so
the amount he has is near microscopic. You see how he's pausing and thinking. He doesn't have an answer. He doesn't have a good answer for this. What does that mean? He's saying the amount of money. So he was given 20, and Cenk has like 200 million. So that's like a 5% of his money. Is that what he's trying to say? Go ahead, kid. You have the answer.
So look, I like I said, I've been reading the Prince and the Discourses, but I've also been following a lot of other channels that talk about leadership and management. And what Cenk is doing right now is something you do not do in meetings. At nowhere in that point in time did Briahna Joy Gray ask if you pay back that 24 million. She asked how that 24 million or that 20 million impacted TYT. She didn't ask that. Cenk is saying that people, again, this is showing insecurity and that he's telling more than he should. If you ever watch a film like the first and second Godfather 1 and Godfather 2, right? The only reason I'm bringing up these films is because what do Vito and Michael have in common? In the meetings and the sit-downs, they let other people talk. They let other people hang themselves. They let other people share what the hell they're doing because they get upset. Like Mo Green yelling at Michael, or either at other people at that sit-down where Vito finally realizes that Barzini is the one who's the traitor. Cenk is telling us more than we asked, because we didn't ask for all of this, and he's panicking. He is afraid. Sometimes it's if he was truly confident, as he says he is, he wouldn't be exploding as he is right now. But
it's
then,
a guilty conscience. It's a guilty conscience that it shows. It's a tale that shows a guilty conscience because he's saying already, I paid it back. Isn't that's you trying to say, yeah, I know it's bad, but I already fixed it. I already fixed it. Like already paid it back. That's what he's trying to say. And he doesn't even address the question, or maybe he does. Let me let it play and see if he addresses the question.
Oh, and by the way, we paid the money back. So I be honest, that's breaking news. We've never told anyone that, but we did. So
no one asked for that.
That has no influence on us. But most importantly, Briahna, people just make up that we went towards the right way or went towards the moderate Democrats. I mean, they call me like those the lunatic fringe that follow Jimmy say we're establishment shills. They haven't watched 1 minute of the show. I mean, look at what the things I said to you before this question, right? Does it look like a 1% pro-establishment? But they will see that and go, aha, nail it. He's for Hillary Clinton. Well, look, I can't help you if you're not dealing with facts.
I just did a video on you, Cenk, and Anna saying the Democratic Party is way better. You guys were freaking pushing Joe Biden.
He said it 2 minutes ago right here.
Yeah.
What is he talking about?
He is what he's doing right now is he's failing. he is failing about, and he is acting not of his age. What he's doing is he's trying to bolster up an image by talking louder, by talking down, and again spewing out points that nobody asked for. So already, what is he sharing with us? That apparently he paid off that $20 million he got from Katzenberg. But if it was an investment, then wait. Why would they pay it back? Is it a loan? What is it? Again, Keaton, you brought it out. He is telling us more than we asked, and he is, again, panicking because he wants to project an image of respect and confidence that TYT has since lost. Okay? TYT has lost that perception of confidence. At one point, they were the only big game in town. Now, not so much. This is Power 101. This man is a terrible leader.
All right, let's play a little more of the video here.
Facts and logic. You can't show anything where we're in favor of Hillary Clinton.
Well,
no one fights harder in the primaries against corporate Democrats
primaries,
than
no one
TYT does, Young Turks does, and I do. I formed the Justice Democrats to fight against corporate Democrats, and we defeated them. There's nothing more practical and more real than what I did there in that instance.
I mean, Cenk, I think specifically one of the moments that I remember of TYT being characterized as no longer capturing the spirit of the Justice Democrats or what the Justice Democrats were supposed to do was the moment around Force the Vote, where there was a push for the elected squad members to take an adversarial relationship to the Democratic Party and Nancy Pelosi specifically, to withhold their votes for them the same way that we've now seen the Freedom Caucus model with withholding their votes for Kevin McCarthy at the beginning of this year, really testing the theory of how that would work and getting in return a number of concessions that I think we can all acknowledge would be amazing for the left to have achieved. And at that time, despite there being a poll that TYT put out of its audience, where a majority of the TYT audience seemed to support Force the Vote, the newscasters, the personalities on the show were very much against it. And as I'm sure you can remember, that
I've watched enough content. You see how he has his mouth? That's him forcing his mouth together. He knows he is seething right now. That is not a natural expression for him. He is pressing his lips together so that he doesn't interrupt her. He's not on his network. He doesn't want to come off as a maniac like he did in the last interview.
He is.
But let's play it some more.
A significant rift down the left that persists in many ways. What do you say to that? I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, it's crazy. But thank you for bringing it up, because I'm happy to address it and try to clarify it the best I can. Guys, do I look like I don't want to force votes? Of course I do.
Yes,
right?
Yes, you did.
Yes. What does that mean? Why are you asking that question? Do I look like? Well, if you didn't do it, that would mean you look like you wouldn't do it.
Well, there's more to that.
Silly question to pose.
There's so much more to that, because again, look, Cenk was for at least 1 week, including Sam Cedar, were on board with Force the Vote. Now, again, maybe they got a phone call, but also during that same time, that's when Anna did her Me Too against Jimmy Dore for his nice new skirt thing. All right. Again, it is, and then also even asking where Anna got some jeans so he could buy it for his wife. Okay. First of all, Anna, after so long, sends that direct message in as a threat to Jimmy, which is so stupid. I think we all remember that. But again, that was happening during Force to Vote. All right. For all what Jimmy and everyone else was asking for Force to Vote is, let's get a roster of how many Democrats and yes, Republicans that would vote against Medicare for all at the height of a pandemic. If the 15 congressmen and women who are on the Force to Vote petition formed a coalition to withhold their vote for Nancy, it would put them on the spotlight, these corporate Democrat jagoffs. All right. And no, McCarthy would not become Speaker of the House because we saw the Freedom Caucus do that, and Hakeem Jeffries didn't become Speaker of the House. They kept on revoting and revoting and revoting. That's what would happen if AOC had the audacity and courage to do so, to push for a Force to Vote. No Republicans would become Speaker of the House, okay? It was safe and secure, but Cenk didn't do it because Cenk either got a phone call or something else happened. This is a man who has a guilty conscience.
Any comments, Keaton, before we go back?
No, we can let that run. I think that was well said.
Yeah.
I think that covered everything I could have said.
And I tell every congressperson that's going into Congress for the first time, if they'll listen to me, I tell them, you have to create what the civil rights movement called good trouble. Now, that doesn't mean you go in wildly and flailing around doing impractical things, but it means you come up with a coordinated strategy, you then create good trouble, and then you put a spotlight on an issue where you are on the winning end of it, popularity-wise. So, for example, one of the things we did with Justice Democrats is as soon as AOC won, we did a sit-in Nancy Pelosi's office. That put Green New Deal on the map. That put Sunrise Movement on the map.
I'm sorry, CJ, can you pause for 1 second?
Justice Democrats
the idea that agitating for a Green New Deal in Nancy Pelosi's office was more popular with the general public than forcing a high-profile showdown over Medicare for all, which polls extremely well amongst the general public, is just nonsense. Like, the coordinated strategy was to go virtue signal in Nancy Pelosi's office over a Green New Deal, which is not nearly as popular or as urgent as universal health care. And so that is just a piece of gaslighting right there. Yeah. Sorry.
No problem. All right, let's get right back to it. Let's see what he says.
I want you to take those kind of actions, but you have to actually use your mind and independent judgment as to which action to take. So Force to Vote, Jimmy comes to me. Back then, we're still friends and allies. And I go, oh, look, it sounds like a pretty good idea.
Fucking solar panels in Nancy Pelosi's office. That's what the people really want you to do, as opposed to force a reckoning on universal health care.
Thank you for saying that, because
their argument against it. I'm sorry, Kit. I'll give it right to you. No. But their argument against it, Kit, is they can't. It's an argument that Sam and Cenk they can no longer make. This is why he's not as confident in arguing against Force to Vote, because he seems very not incompetent. That's what I meant to say, but he doesn't seem confident in his argument or being as forceful as speaking against it, because we can literally talk about the Freedom Caucus and name tangible things they got. You get what I'm saying? So it's not a fantasy anymore. We can literally say, what do you mean? This just happened this year. Force to Vote just happened this year with GOP. Why didn't we do this? We could have this. We could have this. Imagine if Nancy Pelosi was in a position that Kevin McCarthy is in, where one person can call for a vote to vacate the speaker. You know how embarrassing that would be, right, to have all these people just, even if it's not going to pass, just the fact that you're bringing this up, it'll be well, why are you asking for this issue? It brings more attention to the issue. Just think about it, guys. How if the squad was in the same position, they hate you, but they have to listen to you, right? Just like they have to listen to Matt Gaetz. Go ahead, guys.
Right.
If you
want so again, with because I remember covering the situation that Kevin McCarthy had to go through with my colleague Farron at the time, and we both found it hilarious that the Freedom Caucus was gaining so much political ground and getting all their almost majority of their concessions met by the Republican Party. It is rather sad and pathetic that there are people who still carry water for the Democratic Party, because the squad could have done the same thing. But it leads me to call into question just what is the squad there for, or is that the squad in name? Because these progressives won't fight. So if you're in the Democratic Party and you call yourself a progressive, I don't view you as an ally or somebody who I can talk to. I view you as somebody who is just trying to put on a preface to a corrupt party, because if the Republicans can gain ground and get what they want, you don't have a goddamn excuse in my book. And it tells me that I can't trust you. I can't work with you. You don't respect me. And you don't respect the people who worked and knocked on doors to get you into office because you said you would fight. AOC's now been in politics for 5 years. She said she'd be okay with being just a one-term congresswoman. She's a hypocrite. She's Nancy Pelosi 2.0, as are all of her colleagues as well. I remember one of, again, my Congresswoman Marie Newman, who's from Illinois. She was only one term in, and she was just like any other corporate Democrat, and yet she ran with the Justice Democrats and progressives. She didn't do anything, and she was on, again, that force to vote petition, and she didn't fight. And even though she said she'd fight for Medicare for all, Democrats, liberals, vote blue no matter who. Sell your fear corn, 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 to somebody else, because I ain't buying it.
All right, so let's get back to the video. Let's see where it goes from here.
We want to do something where we're forcing action, right? So what's your plan, Jimmy? He's like, well, we're going to force a vote, and we're going to—
That's not what Jimmy said.
Get Medicare for all. I'm like, brother,
no.
I want Medicare for all, but you have to take steps. You have to take steps. If you go straight to Medicare for all, you have a 0% chance of it passing, and you're going to waste the power and the leverage. And who—
you think he doesn't hear, Bree? He is trying to prolong what he's saying, because he can hear Bree wants to interrupt. He knows Bree's about to spike the ball in his face. That's what he's doing. So let's let it play out and see what happens.
Yeah, she does.
Who are you going to get as Speaker of the House? And he's
That
like,
wasn't the argument.
I don't know. That's your strategy? No, I'm not going to agree with a moron who has no strategy, no plan, not at all practical. We could have forced the vote on $15 minimum wage, and we could have won that vote.
Oh,
but
yeah. Oh, sure,
yeah, well, you didn't do what I wanted. Okay, then I'm out.
He's clearly been triggered.
I'm not going to help you guys get the bills that
well, there's a
want.
few different lies there. Number one, no one, including Jimmy Dore, ever said we would get Medicare for all if we did force the vote. Nobody ever said we were going to win it right then and there. The point of that was to get everybody on record as to whether or not they would support a Medicare for all bill and force that debate, not only in the halls of Congress, but that would thereby obviously force a debate throughout the country. That's number one. Number two, there was never this mystery about who would end up Speaker of the House. In fact, the plan for force the vote was always for Nancy Pelosi to end up Speaker of the House, but the idea was to force her to give certain concessions to the progressive wing in order to get there, just like the Republicans did to their eventual House leader. And the third thing that he mentioned right here. What was the thing that he just said here? He said, if some lunatic comes in here screaming at me, it's unfocused. I forget what it was.
Yeah, no,
foaming at the mouth.
Let's play it.
Yeah,
foaming at the mouth. Right.
No, I'm not going to agree with
the third thing. The third thing is, well, if you're foaming at the mouth and you're yelling at me and you're not asking me what I think, right? In terms of like there was never a counter offer as to, hey, let's not try Medicare for all, let's do minimum wage. I'm sure if somebody put forward a better idea, we'd have been open to that.
That never happened.
Right, but that never happened. According to Briahna Joy Gray, and I believe she is right about this, I think Sirota sort of marginally supported it, but thought that there were better asks. Right. And that's why they had that big Zoom call where Jimmy was on it and a bunch of other guys were on it. I think Sirota was on it. I think Matt Stoller was on it. I might be mistaken about that. But there were some people who were like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea, but Medicare for All is not the right ask. There was some openness as to what the right ask was, but Cenk wasn't part of that conversation. Cenk never said, hey, let's do $15 minimum wage instead. He's full of shit.
Why isn't your response, and then I'll play the video, why isn't your response, wow, forcing a vote is a good idea, but let's have a different ask, or let's have multiple asks. If you want Medicare for All, why isn't that your response instead of, is Jimmy involved? And let's get back to the video.
With a moron who has no strategy, no plan, not at all practical. We could have forced the vote on $15 minimum wage, and we could have won that vote.
No,
instead,
hold on. I'm sorry. Can you pause it? I'm sorry. Can you please pause it, rewind it? I'm sorry. But $15 minimum wage, we saw Cinema do her little curtsy and do her thumbs down, okay? That's what she did. And then second of all, look, it's not about Jimmy Dore. Even Jimmy said it during the height of Force the Vote. It's not about him. It's not about Cenk. It's about a bigger picture overall. I've spoken to Jimmy Dore, and I could proudly say I know Jimmy Dore, okay? It wasn't about him. It was about a fight for Medicare for All. Force the Vote. Jimmy didn't even come up with it. It's from the freaking DSA playbook that they won't even pick up. So in other words, there were people in other positions of power, other organizations that could have led for Force the Vote. Jimmy saw it and said, hey, guys, let's do this. And none of those people did it, including DSA and everybody else. So it's not about Jimmy. It was about something bigger than all of us. But no, Jimmy lives in Cenk Uygur's head because you know what? Probably Cenk Uygur is an egomaniac, and he's ticked off that maybe Jimmy was the one who led it. But guess what, Cenk? The Democrats won't fight for you. The squad won't fight. They won't even go on your goddamn show anymore.
Right. Well,
is Jimmy your problem? Sorry. Again, go.
No. That's okay.
No, I think, but I do, and I'm going to play it here. I do. What if the Katzenberg money, what if part of that deal is for him to remain distant from Jimmy? Because many people are trying to facilitate a sort of a smoothing over this relationship and trying to and come together. But he's the one, because Jimmy's never saying, I would never. He's the one that's always saying, I would never associate with Jimmy. But let's get back.
Okay, then I'm out. I'm not going to help you guys actually get the bills that we all want. Oh, come on, man. Grow up.
No, so Cenk, I would point out that Kevin McCarthy is still Speaker of the House. The issue was not whether or not Nancy Pelosi would necessarily become Speaker. The left, people
Briahna,
like yourself. Wait a minute.
Who's going to replace Nancy Pelosi?
Cenk,
you guys have a candidate. Who?
Nobody.
Cenk, if I could, the right-wing caucus got a number of meaningful concessions. Regardless,
but that's not what we were going for, Briahna. That's exactly the problem.
What do you mean?
If they said let's go for meaningful concessions, I would have been in. They said we're going to get Medicare.
So he's saying, that's what I'll. So go ahead, Keaton. Then I'll chime in because I think you're going to
absolutely. The whole point was to get concessions from Nancy Pelosi. That was the whole point. That was the whole design. He's acting like we wanted. Look, if the goal was to tank Nancy altogether, then it wouldn't have been called Force the Vote, because you wouldn't have been forcing anything. Right. You would just stubbornly refuse to back Nancy Pelosi until they pick someone else. No concessions, no, we'll give you this in exchange for that, nothing. I actually don't think that would have been a particularly bad idea, to be honest. But that was not what the plan was. The reason it was called Force the Vote was because you were going to force concessions from Nancy Pelosi in exchange for the speakership. That was the entire design.
I think them retelling, they have to change the story. This is an indication of how weak your argument is that in order for your argument to look good, you have to be dishonest about the other person's argument. And that's what Cenk and everybody kind of who's against Force the Vote, especially now that we've seen how it could have worked. Because just because somebody is saying, let's force the vote on Medicare for all doesn't exclude adding other things, just like the Freedom Caucus did. They didn't have one ask. If you have this position of power to ask if anything, why would you only do anything? Like, why the point that we're all trying to get to, Cenk, is why not enter the conversation to make it better and say, yeah, okay, force the vote this. Now let's add this. Somebody else would have come in. Let's add this. Now we got 7 things we're forcing the vote on. But you was like, I'm wiping my hands of it and forget about it. It makes me feel like was the $20 million you got from Katzenberg, was it paid back by force to vote? Or did you just recently pay it back? Or did you just now, pay it back before forced to vote? Because that could be an influence of why he decided to not do that. I'm just saying that $20 million is a great influence. But let's get back to Bree.
Care for all.
Cenk,
Sure,
with all
we
due
are.
respect, your
Fantasy
characterization of what happened, I think, is reflective of the lack of grace and communication that was happening among the left at the time.
Wow.
And I think if people had been less motivated by their personal animosities against each other, it seemed that Jimmy Dore, you've expressed some animosity toward him several times during our short conversation here. I do think if those personal animosities weren't at play, maybe we could have been in a world where you were listening to myself, Crystal Ball, Kyle Kalinske, other figures on the Cornel West, Chris Hedges,
he just
who were
killed him
also
right there.
advocating for this, and who were being very clear that there were any numbers.
Because he looked like a raving maniac, and then just previously in the conversation, they were just talking about how left conversation and Discord is, and he's like, "We were just talking about this, Cenk, and you're proving it right here." And did you see the change in his face? Like, oh wow, yeah. Like, you can see it. He's trying to hold that shit in, but you can see this fool realize he got caught right here in the same interview of saying, oh, yeah, I'm against that. Just pointing out stuff. But look how huffy and puffy you just got, Cenk. And Jimmy is not even here. They're not even asking you a question about Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy was brought for no reason. Exactly.
They're asking about forced to vote. You're the one asking about. You're the one that keeps inserting Jimmy, just like the previous interview you did with Bree on TYT. It's so telling that this guy is such a temperamental, like. I'm trying not to, I just played a video. I don't want to.
Number of demands. I wrote an article in Current Affairs that set all of this out contemporaneously. So you can go back and look that it wasn't this idea that we were going to hold the vote and magically get Medicare for all. And to the extent that that was your presumption
Briahna,
or your belief,
no,
I
it
do
wasn't.
She just told you she has contemporaneous evidence, which is an article written at the time, Cenk. How are you going to dispute that if in the article are the points of why we want to force a vote or what do we want to do? And now you've retelling the history because you look bad. Like, this hasn't aged well for you. And the Freedom Caucus have extracted all of these things and they're getting what they want.
And the other lie that he told, because look, all of this is just a pack of lies. I mean, that's all this is. The idea that, well, we could have won the $15 minimum wage. We could have passed the $15 minimum wage had we picked that battle instead of Medicare for all. $15 minimum wage passed the House in 2021. Build Back Better passed the House. Build Back Better had enough votes in the House. We're talking about forced to vote. We're talking about the House. Once you clear the House, you have to clear the Senate, where, of course, $15 minimum wage, along with the rest of the Build Back Better program, died at the hands of Sinema and Manchin. So the idea that there was a winnable fight that was passed over in favor of a losing fight, Medicare for all, again, that is just ahistorical bullshit. It's just not true. It's simply a lie to say that.
Yeah, and let's see where I don't want to know where can he take it from here after she completely diffuses him.
It gets better
go
because
ahead.
Again, we're going to see a grown man act like a child. And again, one other final note: it's very petty, and it's what I'm going to say is out of pure pettiness. You never wear a striped T-shirt at an interview, okay? On TV. You just, look, it messes with the camera lens. It does all this stuff. Solid colors, my lovelies. Wear solid goddamn colors. It's not too hard.
You don't even wear a pinstripe without a jacket. It doesn't. You don't wear a pinstripe without a jacket. That's. I don't get that. But anyway, let's play the video. Maybe he wore a jacket earlier and he just doesn't have it in the interview. I'm hoping that's what it is because it's weird to wear a pinstripe shirt.
Yeah, he's probably too nervous. He probably started sweating. He had to take it off.
And this is from a guy who had to wear a suit and tie for work for like 15 years straight. So
exactly,
it's just not it. But
who's going to replace Nancy Pelosi? Did you guys have a candidate? Who?
Cenk, if I could, the right-wing caucus got a number of meaningful concessions. Regardless,
but that's not what we were going for, Briahna. That's exactly the problem. If they said let's go for meaningful concessions, I would have been in. They said we're going to get Medicare for all.
Cenk,
sure, we are.
Your characterization of what happened, I think, is reflective of the lack of grace and communication that was happening among the left at the time.
Face right here.
And I think if people had been less motivated by their personal animosities against each other, it seemed that Jimmy Dore, you've expressed some animosity toward him several times during our short conversation here. I do think if those personal animosities weren't at play, maybe we could have been in a world where you were listening to myself, Crystal Ball, Kyle Kulinski, other figures on the Cornel West, Chris Hedges, who were also advocating for this and who were being very clear that there were any number of demands. I wrote an article in Current Affairs that set all of this out contemporaneously, so you can go back and look, that it wasn't this idea that we were going to hold the vote and magically get Medicare for all. And to the extent that that was your presumption
Briahna,
and your belief, I do think that is a real problem in communication on the left.
That you guys wanted at the time. Name one other concession. At the time, don't make it up now. At the time, name one other thing you guys want. I
invite you and the rest of the audience to go look at an article I wrote in the Current Affairs magazine in November of 2020, in which I consulted with David Sirota and included a list of subsequent ancillary demands that he had written up in his own publication. And
he looks like a fucking fool. He looks like an idiot. Go ahead, Keaton.
This is a very important point to make. He said, can you name one other thing besides Medicare for all? Again, he's being intentionally dishonest there.
No. Yeah,
because what he's saying is, can you name something besides Medicare for all, as if the expectation was to actually pass Medicare for all and have Joe Biden sign Medicare for all. That is not what the goal was. The goal was to force a floor vote on Medicare for all. And he's being intentionally slippery with his language. He's saying Medicare for all to mean we're going to pass it, sign it, and implement it. That was never the goal. Nobody ever thought that was going to happen. It obviously didn't have the votes to pass then. It still wouldn't have the votes to pass now in the GOP-controlled House. But I'm saying even if the Democrats win this year, we're nowhere near that. That wasn't the point. It was never the point. That was never the point. The point was to force a vote on it, not to pass it. And he is conflating those two things on purpose.
And also shine a light on the Democratic lawmakers that would be against Medicare for all at the height of the pandemic. It was about reinvigorating hope and fire within the progressive movement and maybe potentially reforming the Democratic Party.
Exactly.
Being generous with those words, maybe reforming the Democratic Party, but they didn't. And the thing is, Jimmy wasn't raving at the mouth. I think the reason why Jimmy got angry at the end of it was because people were making it about Jimmy Dore. And Jimmy has said on numerous occasions, and even when I interviewed him in the aftermath of it, he said, it's not about me. That's what Jimmy Dore said to me. I've spoken to him not only online, but face-to-face about it.
You know, I believe he said this too at the time, and
it wasn't about him. Sorry to cut you off, Keaton. Go ahead.
No, it's okay, because I wasn't so much active in the YouTube space back then. We started our show as just an audio podcast and a blog, so I watched this stuff, but I wasn't like wired in the way I'm assuming you guys were. But didn't Jimmy say at the outset? Because I know CJ, you were a Tom Hartman guy, right? You came up.
I came through the radio. Yeah, I came through the radio.
Maybe you would notice then.
Okay, let's hear it.
Is it? I seem to remember Jimmy saying at the very beginning, the first video he made pitching for us to vote, I believe he said something to the effect of, and please say if I'm wrong, like, I will consider all past feuds water under the bridge if we can unite on this. Did he say something like that?
Can I elaborate more? He says, look. He said, not only did he say that, but again, I have to look at the video before that. But he said, hey, look, I forgive you. You forgive me. Let's put all of this beside us. Let's fight for something bigger, because I think we have an opportunity here. Jimmy was saying, like, hey, we got an opportunity here. Let's put everything behind us. We could do something great here with the aftermath of the election because Biden's in office. So here we go. Let's see if we really can make it happen. And for 1 week, Cenk and Sammy Cedar were on board with forced to vote. Jimmy was the one who said, I will put everything behind me.
Right.
Water under the bridge. So you're absolutely correct. Jimmy Dore was the one who brought it up. But the thing is, he was the one who wanted. What I like to think in my mind, I want to speculate is, I think Jimmy was the one like, hey, let's bring this up. But he wanted to bring other people on board who could articulate it, because there'd be trouble on the inside for politics, but trouble on the outside, like a two-pronged strategy, a pincer movement to really push the Democrats and AOC and the 15 congressmen and women to actually push for force to vote. Unfortunately, that didn't come to fruition because I think Cenk and Sam Cedar and a couple other people got a phone call, and then that's also when Anna did her Me Too. So you guys are more or less, yeah, it's on point. I got to find the video for reference, but yeah, that's exactly how it went down.
All right, let's listen to a little more of the interview.
To them and say that these are also important. The important thing is that we need to demand something in exchange for our votes. But we don't need to rehash that. Go ahead. I'll give you the last.
No, I need to say one last thing, Briahna. I need to say one last thing. You guys make it sound like we're the ones who have animus. No.
Yes.
Be clear about how this thing started.
God.
As I told you in the beginning, I said, well, that's interesting. Let's have a conversation about strategy. And the minute I said, let's have a conversation about strategy, Jimmy said that we were taking money from the CIA and Nancy Pelosi. You just mentioned David Sirota. He also attacked David Sirota. He also attacked Amy Goodman from Democracy Now! and insinuated she was working with the CIA. So then I thought, well, no, I'm not going to work with a lunatic who thinks that Amy Goodman might be working with the CIA. And second of all, I didn't start the fight. This lunatic comes in frothing at the mouth. I'm being funded by CIA. And Nancy Pelosi. How are you supposed to have a rational conversation with an absolute lunatic like that? And then you guys think we started it? Are you insane?
I didn't say you started it. I don't care about the personalities. Cenk, you're talking about personalities. I'm talking about issues. All I know is that David Sirota supported Force the Vote. I had him on my podcast talking about it many times.
That's not true.
Yes, he did.
No,
and he
didn't.
continues to be an advocate that I value and respect a great deal. And he is able, as a mature person, to tease away his personal feelings about human beings that he might share an idea with or a strategy with, and the underlying strategy. And I really do hope that we see more of that on the left and less of a focus on who it is that's delivering a certain kind of a message, especially if you're right, Cenk, and it's going to require a united and powerful independent media force in order to actually ever get a progressive into office. Thank you so much for joining us today and talking through some of these tough issues.
No problem. And you guys are funded by the CIA. But I'm sure you won't take offense at that. So just be cool. Be cool. Let's agree on policies. But you're obviously, Briahna had bought her house, has a Mercedes and a Rolls Royce, all funded by Hillary Clinton and the CIA. But it's cool. It's cool. Let's stay friends.
About the only thing Briahna has convinced me of on this show is that there is, in fact, more dysfunction on the left than on the right. And today is a good example of that. Thank you very much, Cenk.
That, unfortunately, is true.
Yeah, and you're part of it, Cenk.
I am not at all convinced that Cenk doesn't understand the role that he's playing as chaos agent. So when you say I paid it back, did you? I would like to see the receipts, sir. And paying it back does not mean you did not fulfill, and it's not continuing to fulfill whatever that money was meant to get from you. Like, it's clear. There's no way. This guy is terrible in interviews. The way he comes off, he's terrible. Mm-hmm. There's no way he's not going home looking at this shit and going, man, I look bad. Like, no reflection. There's no way that he can have this level of no reflection unless it's intentional. That's why I think this is all intentional. There's no way that he can. You're retelling stories with the whole thing about the speaker thing, for example. How is it in 2023 you still don't understand that Kevin McCarthy was not going to be speaker? Like, how do you still not know that after so many disputes? You get what I'm saying? After so many, like, content has been done on this, for you to still have these sort of misconceptions is telling me it's intentional. There's no way a person who is in this media space, Keaton and Kent, mm-hmm. that doesn't by now know some of these things. For example, like Kevin McCarthy would have never been speaker. Why are you still kind of talking about that? It speaks to he is not at all being genuine. Everything he's saying is a projection. Everything he's saying about the other person, about Jimmy, is a projection about himself. He literally just said, you guys act like we started it. Is that a serious thing, Keaton? Is that serious? Go ahead, Keaton or Kit.
No, take it away, Keaton. Go shoot.
It's just complete revisionist history on his part. That whole piece was. I mean, that entire piece was just that. Sirota was part of that big Zoom call where they talked about what the ask might be, right? I mean, he was not unwelcome for, questioning, should it be Medicare for all, should it be something else? They had a big roundtable. I think Katie Halper was part of it, if I'm not mistaken.
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah. So there was a conversation going on. Cenk didn't want to be a part of it, and he can't rationalize not wanting to be a part of it because there is just no excuse to have not embraced that at this point. The reason why Cenk didn't want to embrace force to vote is because he was afraid that the squad didn't have the stomach for it and that they would come out of it with egg on their face. And he didn't want them to suffer that sort of branding defeat. Whereas Matt Gaetz and whoever the tit grabber is there, because it wasn't Marjorie Taylor Greene, it was Lauren Boebert, Gaetz, and a few others. They banded together. And they said, look, we're going to take a lot of shit for this in the short term, but if we stick to our guns, we will not lose. And they did not lose. They got the new church committee. They got the single vote to recall the speaker, concession Adam McCarthy, which they're now weaponizing against him right now. And now they're going for another round. And they're going to win some battles. They're going to lose some battles, but they can't lose as long as they stick together. And it was very obvious that the anxiety on the part of the Justice Democrats founders, including Cenk in this case, more than Kyle, who says he was for it, but I think he was pretty mealy-mouthed on it as well, is that the squad didn't have the guts for it, that they would eventually cave and look bad, which is probably true. They probably would have caved and looked bad, but Cenk can't admit that. Like, if you just were man enough to admit, hey, you know why I was against forced to vote? Because I didn't trust AOC not to pussy out in the end. That's an answer. That's an honest answer, right? But what he's acting like your aims were unrealistic, and like I said, I just went down the list earlier. I don't have to say it all again. He just completely made up the actual timeline of how that went down and what the demands actually were.
I think also what we have to take into account, especially with the squad, is that around this time, too, Cenk's influence with Justice Democrats, brand new Congress, our revolution, was already evaporated at the time. So he had no power to really influence at all. So even if Cenk were to go on board, he could yell on his platform, but they didn't even show up on his show even during the 2020 election. Well, I think maybe one of or two, maybe Rokana here and there, but again, he wanted access for these people. He had the hope that he could still have Democrats, especially people like AOC, be on the show, and he didn't want to lose access to it. So maybe he was afraid of, if I really go all in, they won't ever show up, and they still won't. They still won't answer his phone calls. And the thing is, even with the creation of Justice Democrats, and I know my colleague Daniel, he brought this up, and that is, Justice Democrats never signed a contract or either that had rules or regulations to ensure that they would keep the squad in line because, they could, let's say there was a contract made like, hey, if you don't do X, Y, and Z for us, not only will we vote you out, but we'll make sure you don't get any more funding, and we will do everything we can to remove you because you're not following with our ideology and our responsibility of how we want to reform the Democratic Party. Cenk and Kyle never put that, what do you call that? A backup plan in case the squad members or any Justice Democrats members would fail in their responsibility in being elected into office. They never had that foresight. They never had that backup plan.
I'm seeing some comments in the chat that are reminding me what it was. So
I have to head out real quick. Now I'll be right back. There's somebody at the door. And I'm trying to find
absolutely.
I'll be right back.
You said there's comments in the chat,
I just read a couple comments that sort of reminded me what that was. So the panel I'm thinking of, DC put in the chat that was what Katie Halper organized on her channel, which now it is coming back to me a little bit. And that Matt Stoller was against it. Sam says Matt Stoller was opposed it. I remember Matt Stoller started talking something about committee seats. And Jimmy did not like that idea and made it very known that he did not like that idea. I remember he screamed at him. He said, "You fucking nerd," or something like that.
That's so milquetoast.
Yeah.
The same way. I would
so
be
that's
like,
what that
what?
was. So that, but there was a round table. There was a panel discussion where they talked it out, and as I understand, it it got heated at certain points, but they sat down and talked it through. And to the best of my memory, and I apologize, I probably shouldn't have brought this up if I didn't remember exactly what I was talking about. But if anybody in the chat wants to confirm this, Cenk was not on that call. He was not present for that. He just didn't want a part of it. And like I said, the chat, if there's anybody in there with a better memory than me, correct me if I'm wrong.
That could have been a call where he said, "Hey, how about we add this on there? How about we ask for this? How about we ask for these other things?" But of course, he's a bad faith actor. I just don't buy that he's still messing up these details. I don't buy that. So I take it as him just conceding the point, and he's refusing. He's conceding the point via refusing to acknowledge reality of what actually happened when you were even talking about it in the past. It's just completely dishonest.